finally we get to try the Low Rider S. And for this review or impression ride, I'm going to be comparing it a lot with the bike that's behind it, which is the Fat Bob 114, the bike that I consider as the best softail for me and my riding style. But everyone that I know that started out on the Iron 883 tends to gravitate towards the Low Rider S, as you guys probably know as well. So what I'm trying to do is to see if it is actually a better bike than the Fat Bob, how it feels, how it performs. And given that this 2022 version has an upgraded air filter and as well as small improvement on the displacement of the engine, which has 117 cubic inches rather than 114, it has a 5-gallon fuel tank compared to what a Fat Bob has, which I think is about 3.6. So a fair bit of difference, but it is a heavier bike. It is about 670 pounds, so it's not a light bike, but for a cruiser at this scale of an engine, it's about average. The best thing I like about this is that it's got dual disc front brakes, which has 4 piston calipers on each side, which should give you plenty of braking power. So as I sit on the Low Rider S itself, again, I find myself that this fuel tank is a lot wider than what I'm used to on the Fat Bob. So it is a bit more spread out, and this isn't quite the mid control as I was expecting. It is slightly forward, but I still do have that good 90-degree bend on my knee that I'm very comfortable with. There are 2 versions out there for the Low Rider S. Obviously, you got the Low Rider S, and then you got the Low Rider ST that has the batwing fairings and the side luggage mounts that the Softail Sport Guide used to have. But because that's been canceled, you now have the Low Rider ST as the only option from the Softail lineup that gives you hard side bags. So other than the 50-pound difference between the ST model and the Low Rider S model, the center gauge is slightly different. This is more of the gauge that I'm used to. Let's just turn it on here, where you got an analog tachometer and then you got a digital speedometer with the fuel gauge. They did end up moving the gauge up to the handlebar like the Sportster rather than having it on the fuel tank, which has been the tradition since the birth of the Low Rider in the Dyna series. But I'm a big fan of this because now I don't have to look down to see how fast I'm going, especially if I'm wearing a full face helmet. Oh my god, I'm burning up. It is so fucking hot. Let's get going. As a stock bite, it actually sounds pretty decent. Yeah, this feels a lot more comfortable than the ST, to be honest. I feel like there's a lot more leg space. Where are you gonna go? Make up your mind. So like in front of me is the Low Rider ST, as you can tell by the plastic baggage. Okay, let's just concentrate on not getting hit. Oh, this thing freaking pulls. Yes. You know, without that extra 50 pounds that the ST model has, this definitely gives you that performance that I was looking for. And yeah, rider like me who doesn't need a touring bike yet, I would say between the 2 models, the Low Rider S naked version is definitely what I would be gravitating towards. Now obviously the ST model, you can easily take the batwing fairing off and as well as the saddlebags, but you are also paying an extra to get those add-ons. Now unfortunately, because we're on a group ride like this, I'm not going to be able to test out the full speed of the motorcycle, which is what I don't like doing, but I do it for you guys and as well be able to ride the Low Rider S for the first time rather than waiting for one to show up on the shop floor. But man, this bike feels so much lighter compared to the Low Rider ST. Like, you can really feel it. I wouldn't say it's light enough to be flicking around. It definitely feels heavy when you're moving the body of the bike. But for a Softail, it feels super smooth. Like, I'm getting very little vibration from the bike itself because the Milwaukee 8 engine has been fine-tuned for the last 5 years or so. And they just increased it to 117 cubic inches, which is what a Low Rider S should be, because that's what the letter S is for. It's supposed to be standing out from all the other Softails. Now, one thing that I'm noticing, which was similar to the ST, was that this upgraded air filter is somewhat touching my shin. If I wanted to mod this motorcycle to have forward controls, then I think I'm gonna have to change out the air filter as well. Man, this thing has a lot of acceleration power. I guess that's what you should expect when you have about close to a 2-liter displacement of a motorcycle. It's got 125 foot-pounds of torque and 105 base horsepower. Now, does it feel faster or better than a Fat Bob? It's kind of tough to tell because we're in this weird group ride where I can't really test out the speed and acceleration. But what's confirmed for me is how much I like the fuel gauge or speedometer being at the center on the handlebar, just like my Iron 883, because I no longer have to look down onto the fuel tank. Now, some people don't like this design because they like the classic Dyna version that's on the fuel tank, and because they don't wear a full face helmet like I do, it doesn't bother them. But for me, because I ride with a full face helmet, I like it when I can read the speed and the RPM with the peripherals of my vision without having to change my head position. Now, the bike is holding speed really well at 3rd gear right now. I'm going about 80 kilometers per hour. It's about 3,000 RPM. I mean, it's kind of a boring speed. You can definitely tell on this bike that it wants to go faster, but that is the flaw of going on a group test ride like this. Now, in comparison to the Fat Bob, I'm gonna say the Fat Bob definitely felt faster than this bike. I know this bike has a bit more performance, but because of the riding ergonomics and the way I'm sitting, I feel like not much of a difference with the Fat Bob. The brakes, however, feel really good, thanks to the dual disc front brakes with 4-piston calipers. That should be the norm for all Softails, because trying to do a quick stop on a 670-pound bike with roughly 220 pounds of rider weight, you need decent brakes to stop you, and I just don't think single disc cuts it. Now, I can see the appeal of the Low Rider S for a lot of Sportster owners because the ergonomics seems very familiar. It has a very similar feel as the Iron 883, but it's got way more torque and horsepower, upgraded brakes, and as well, it's got really decent shocks that you probably don't need to upgrade right off the bat for your Harley tags. Like, I would say the only thing that's left to do for this bike when you purchase one is probably the exhaust. And to be honest, with the current restrictions of exhaust sounds that police forces are starting to regulate in your municipalities, you might not even have an option to upgrade your exhaust anymore because of the fear of getting a ticket for obnoxious or excessive noise complaint or something like that. I don't know. I know my city's starting to have that now. But yeah, I must say, it's a pretty comfortable ride. The seat's not too bad. It doesn't feel too hard on my back or my ass. I do still prefer the seat of the Fat Bob, just because I think it has a bit more plushness to it. But this Low Rider S's stock seat is still miles better than my Sportster Iron 83 or any of the Sportster seats. Now, compared to the Low Rider S-T, I would say this Low Rider S definitely feels lighter. Not too light to the point where I would consider it as nimble or light, but definitely feels lighter than the ST, and that 50-pound difference definitely plays a big role. And this mini fairing that the Low Rider S comes with, it doesn't block any wind or anything like that, so I do feel all the wind on my arms and my chest and my head, but it's kind of like a good balance of wind, which is what I'm used to on my Sportster. This bike is very familiar to me. I like it. Would I choose this over the Fat Bob? I don't know. It really depends on what you want a bike to do. If you want to go on longer trips, then I would consider the Low Rider S first because it's got a 5-gallon fuel tank compared to the Fat Bob's 3.6 gallons. But if you're looking for like purely performance and the unique style of a motorcycle, I would say the Fat Bob is the way to go, which is the one that's right next to me. That's a pretty good looking bike. Would I recommend this bike for a new rider? I don't think so. The bike itself, it is super expensive and the bike is super heavy. So if you had to do some slow maneuvers or emergency maneuvers, the sheer weight of this bike will definitely come and eat you alive as a new rider. And yeah, you're most likely gonna drop this very expensive bike. So just by that reason alone, I would say it's not new rider friendly. And the sheer power of this motorcycle, like, you're gonna have to learn how to have a really good throttle discipline, and it's hard to learn that from a bigger bike, in my opinion. But who knows? Everyone's different. Now, as we conclude our ride back to Barnes Harley-Davidson dealership, this is when I get to actually try out some of the slower maneuvers with this bike. So let's see how it goes. Yeah, it's very torquey. I like that. is this bike? Right about here, I think. Alright, let's see if I can find neutral easily. Boop, there it is. Engine off. And the awkward kickstand that I always have a hard time to see if this is on properly. Yep, it's good. Woo! There it is, guys. Here's my first ride impression of the Low Rider S. Finally, in the end, yes, it's a great bike. Is it better than the Fat Bob? It all depends on what you're looking for. I would say there is definitely pros and cons between the two. My personal choice, I think I would go with the Fat Bob just because of what I'm looking for. But if I was going to travel a lot and I don't want to do a lot of stop for the gas station, then definitely the 5-gallon gas tank will push me over to get the Low Rider S. So if you enjoyed this, please press that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And as always, ride safe, ride prepared, ride on. Peace.